Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us for the Expert Series Economic Update with Benjamin Tall. A quick CMBA-BC overview. CMBA-BC is committed to elevating professionalism, supporting the broker community through education, advocacy, and connection. A big part of the association's role right now is, of course, keeping you in the loop of what to expect during the transition of the Mortgage Services Act. And CMBA-BC is sitting at the table with the regulator, assisting with the transition and advocating for its members every step of the way. Staff and board members are working hard to make sure that you have the information you need to serve your clients and make sure you're all dialed in properly under the new act. All right, a quick introduction. My name is Dustan Woodhouse. I'm your moderator today, and I'm the author of the Be the Better Broker workshop series, and you'll find me popping up on stages from coast to coast, more or less yelling and screaming at mortgage brokers to do better. I don't yell and scream that much. Anyway, I like to help industry professionals grow into their best selves. All right, enough about me. The man of the hour, our featured guest, is Benjamin Tall, Managing Director and Deputy Chief Economist at CIBC Capital Markets Inc., with nearly 20 years of experience advising on key economic and financial matters. He's a trusted voice on housing trends, credit markets, and macroeconomic policy. Today, he will unpack the latest market developments. And that was where I just paused to make sure I was unmuted. I first heard Benjamin Tall speak in 2008, November of 2008. It was a phenomenal presentation. It's stuck with me to this day, actually. All right, some thank yous. Today's session wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors. So a special thank you to Home Trust, who proudly helps Canadians find tailored financial solutions, taking the time to truly listen to every story. Since 1991, First Circle Financial has worked closely with mortgage brokers, First Circle Financial being our second sponsor. They've worked closely with mortgage brokers to provide residential, commercial, construction, and land alternative mortgage solutions. The broker channel is First Circle's lifeblood, and it's First Circle's goal to make our lives as brokers, your lives as brokers, as easy as possible by providing mortgage solutions tailored to meet your clients' needs. And last but not least, our third sponsor is Bridgewater Bank. Bridgewater Bank proudly presents today's CMBA-BC Expert Series with Benjamin Tall. Bridgewater partners with brokers to deliver flexible mortgage solutions for self-employed clients in particular, refinances, rental properties, and more. Do check out their website, bwbbrokerinfo.ca, as in Bridgewater Bank, just bwbbrokerinfo.ca. A little member benefit reminder, as I said yesterday to a couple audience as well, this session is free for CMBA-BC members. Why wouldn't you be a CMBA-BC member if you're a broker in BC? There's no reason I can think of. I've been a member since I first got my broker's license in 2008. And it's $69 for those who are non-members. So consider joining us to access more events like this at no charge. All inclusive, baby, all inclusive. There's a lot of value in membership, a lot of value, and today's session is just one slice of it. Okay, some upcoming events. Stay tuned for a few additional expert sessions coming up, such as the Appraisal Insights on October 15th at 9:30 a.m. So plug that one into your calendar now, October 15th, 9:30 a.m. That'll be presented in partnership with the Appraisal Institute of Canada, BC, and you can register by visiting the CMBA-BC website. And also the FinTrack Guidelines for Mortgage Brokers course, also worth checking out. It's a self-paced, practical, fantastic tool for brokers and broker admin staff. There's a QR code here that you can scan to learn more and register for that, the FinTrack Guidelines course. Always something new to learn. One more, the MBF, the Mortgage Brokers Fundamentals course, Mortgage Broker Fundamentals course. That's going to open soon for registration. This program, it's helped brokers navigate the mortgage process for a long time. It's a fantastic course from client acquisition to post-closing management. It's tailored specifically to BC. It combines real-world scenarios with essential regulatory insights from the Mortgage Brokers Act and updates under the new Mortgage Services Act. So even if you've taken the MBF in the past, it's probably going to be worth a revisit just to brush up and get the latest updates. All right, a disclaimer. Please note that today's session is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal or financial advice. The views expressed by our speakers and participants are their own and do not necessarily represent those of CMBA-BC. So hopefully my foot stays out of my mouth. We shall see. But in the event that my foot goes in my mouth, it's only in my mouth. It's not on CMBA-BC. All right, and last but not least, we do encourage you to submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. And at the end of this presentation/conversation, we will address as many of those questions as we can possibly get to, and we'll go from there. All right, a speaker introduction. Let's talk about Mr. Tall quickly. I want to offer a quick bio and then we'll get into it. Benjamin Tall is Managing Director and Deputy Chief Economist of CIBC Capital Markets, Inc., again with nearly 20 years of experience in analyzing macroeconomic developments and advising on mortgage, real estate, and credit markets. He's been a part of this team that analyzes all of these different macroeconomic events, their implications across markets, including fixed income, equity, foreign exchange, commodities. And Benjamin is known in particular for research into all these different areas, the labor markets, real estate, credit, trade, business, economic conditions, and then bringing it all together into a presentable, palatable form for audiences like us. Benjamin regularly advises bank officers, clients, boards, and government entities. He's a board member of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce's Economic Committee and the Toronto Board of Trade's Economic Development Committee, and also serves on the board of the Governors of Junior Achievement in Central Ontario and Toronto Financial International. All right, I think we have knocked it all out. There we go. We're ready to engage. Please tell me my microphone was on and I was in the webinar, and hopefully our guest has managed to join us. Or do I need to stretch? All right. Wouldn't this would definitely be the great moment, a great moment for the guest to appear. I know we were having a few technical difficulties in the background with our guest, but I was hopeful those were being ironed out. Bear with us a moment, folks. I just got you've got this. Yeah. Hey, well, look, we have a few minutes. Until Benjamin Tall shows up, I'm going to fill the airtime. So what am I going to tell you? I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell you guys all the time. 10 at 10. It's been my most popular slide the last few times, right? I know. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, okay, you know what? I might as well do a short little bit. There has been research on the best time of the day for outbound phone calls. 70% of your clients are open to receiving a phone call between 10 a.m. and noon. 30%, they pick other times of the days, but 7 out of 10 people are likely to pick up a call that is an incoming call between 10 and noon. They're through their inbox, they're caffeinated, they're hydrated, they're fed, they're not hangry yet. Like it's kind of that sweet spot of the day. And I would encourage each and every one of you, no matter what level you're at, to do your best to block 10 till noon for outbound calls and pick up the phone and dial. And, a couple of my favorite stories, I'll give you the most recent, and I'll give you one that's a couple years old, but they're standouts. I just received an email from a gentleman 2 days ago who closed 2.7 million in 2024. That was his total volume. And he'd been in the business a few years and just decided it was time to actually buckle down and do the work, make the calls. And from 2.7 million last year, 33 million funded year to date with another 12 million in the pipe. That is a pretty significant life altering change. And he largely credits it to actually having a non negotiable time block in his calendar and picking up the phone and dialing. And that's where a lot of people say, but who do I call? And that's where I love my first story. And some of you have heard this before, and hopefully Benjamin Tall will join us shortly, and I'll wrap this up. Um, but you know, it's been my mantra, right? Like pick up the phone and make outbound calls for quite a few years. And it was actually a number of years ago now. It's probably 6 years ago. Ken decided he was going to go on a mission and phone every single client. But then when he got through phoning every single client he'd ever worked with, every realtor, pulling up the client's purchase sale contracts, calling the realtor on the other side of the transaction, like calling everyone and anyone he could call, he got to a point where he actually picked up his yearbooks. And this is a gentleman that was around 60 years of age at this time. And he went and dug out his high school and junior high school yearbooks and went through the entire yearbook and called everyone he'd gone to school with. And again, just really two questions. How are you? How may I help you? And just struck up conversations with them. And he phoned me at the end of the year, each year. Actually, he has continued to phone me annually. We just had our annual call a few weeks ago, actually. It was great. And but I'll never forget the one. It was at the end of the first or second year where he phoned me from downtown Vancouver about to board a cruise ship with his childhood best friend from junior high who he had reconnected with. And the two of them and their wives were going on an Alaskan cruise together. If I recall correctly, it was an Alaskan cruise, um, which, you know, that's the other side of picking up the phone and making these outbound calls. I don't know which one is cooler. I mean, going from 2.7 to 33 or potentially 45, um, that's pretty awesome. That's obviously, you know, money doesn't fix all your problems, but it definitely fixes all of your money problems. But the cruise, like, that's a pretty amazing outcome. I thought that was a pretty great outcome. I also thought that the length of those stories would be too long. Boy, oh boy, I'm just going to take a peek at my inbox and see where we're at. Okay, give us 5 opening lines on outbound calls. Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Really? I don't have 5 outbound lines prepared. Okay, here's what it is. As I say, I think that it really boils down to having two key questions, not forgetting to ask how someone is doing, and ideally asking if there's anything you can do, given, you know, they will almost certainly remember you. They pretty well almost certainly know what you do. You probably don't have to remind them, but by all means, you know, hey, Rebecca, it's Dustan Woodhouse calling, your mortgage broker. We worked together about 9 years ago. I've been pretty horrible with outbound calls. Clearly, it's been 9 years since I phoned you, but I wanted to check in. I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm embarrassed to ask, are you actually still in the same home? And a conversation will go from there. Yeah, we're still in the same place. Oh my gosh, we can't believe, you know, the magic you work getting us in the market, blah, 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 blah. Or, no, actually, we've moved 4 times. We've actually increased our mortgage by over $1 million. We've used a different broker each time, but none of them ever follow up with us. So we never really remember their names or how to track them down. And that will make you feel horrible. There's a number of ways those conversations go. But ultimately, how are you? How may I help you? That's really what it boils down to. And another quick anecdotal story. Broker says to me, I've been doing this 15 years. I've never made a single outbound call into my database ever, but I did today because you told me to, and I had nothing else happening. It's pretty quiet. The very first phone call they made was to a couple who unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you want to look at it, um, had decided to split amicably. So that's a fortunate thing. And they understood the lay of the land. They had done a little research. So they wanted to refinance the principal residence, purchase two more properties, so that each of them would have a place to land when the dust settled. So no joke, it turned into three applications, three funded mortgages, and well over $1 million in business from the very first outbound call that broker made in 15 years into their database. And another one from New Brunswick. New Brunswick? No, not New Brunswick. I always get it wrong. Fredericton? The city is Fredericton, but not New Brunswick. Anyway, Brad. Brad. He called his very first client 20 years later. 20 years later. It was the very first client he'd ever worked with. He'd never been in touch with the guy ever again. He called him 20 years later, and he barely got through saying his name, and the guy was instantly, Brad, oh man, it's so great to hear you. I'm actually on the cusp of paying off my house, the one that you helped me buy. The guy absolutely remembered him, didn't care that it had been 20 years, was super excited to talk to him. And what did Brad get when he got off the phone with that client? The son's phone number, because the son was now going to be a first time home buyer. And yeah, he wound up closing the son's mortgage. So I don't know. I could do this all day, but that's not what you came here for. We came here for Benjamin Tall. I'm going to pause for a second because I want to actually see if I have any updates. Yeah. The last update I saw was 21 minutes ago, but I know the team was trying to get Mr. Tall onboarded here. Maybe somebody from the team can jump in the Q&A and mess it because I can't see the chat. We've got that turned off. Throw something in the Q&A, guys, and just let me know where we're at. And look, hey, there's several hundred of you waiting for Mr. Tall. If you got some other questions or some other ideas, fire them at me in the Q&A in the meantime. Let's at least fill this space. All right. Well, okay. One person thinks the webinar is starting at 10 a.m., so that's good. All right, we'll figure it out. When's the next? No, writing a book is really difficult. There is no next book at this point. There are 4 books partially written, none of them complete, and I don't seem to have the same focus that I had. Ironically enough, somehow closing 20 mortgages a month and writing a book on the side was easier than literally having nothing else to really do just other than write the book. But yeah, like completing a book right now eludes me. So that's not happening. Don't know if this helps, but this webinar required sign in to Workplace Zoom and was not a direct link to join the webinar. If anyone doesn't have an account with Zoom, may not be able to join. Well, our host, pardon me, our guest definitely has a Zoom account. In fact, we've had him on before, so I'm really not sure where the issue is. We shall see. I am sure the team is freaking out back there and scrambling to get it figured out. We'll get there. We'll get there. Let's shoot for a 10 a.m. start. Let's assume we're going to have a 10 a.m. start. We've got 6 more minutes to go. Best not to talk about some of these things that people are throwing at me as topical ideas. What is the best advice for a new broker other than picking up the phone? I mean, I think, but that I think it just boils down to that. Okay, I'm gonna share another quick story for you. Jeff, I think you were actually at this event. So May or June, I believe it was May of this year. I spoke at an event with a couple hundred brokers in the room, and during the lunch break, a number of brand new brokers came up to me and asked me the same question. What's the best advice? Like, what's the number one thing you should say I should be doing? And I said, showing up, being at different events, being everywhere and anywhere anything is happening related to the industry, related to real estate, related to finance, like join your chamber of commerce, go to different events, and you will start to see the same faces popping up there, and you'll start interacting with those people. And ultimately, you may wind up starting to pick up business, but it's a slow build. So you've got to get out there. You've got to be everywhere. This was the advice I was giving. Now, on top of that, you have to seize the opportunities that are put in front of you, especially when they're literally on a silver platter. And the reason I haven't named the team or the event, if you were there, you know what's coming. Um, 200 people in the audience. 200, let's say 150 of them active producing mortgage brokers. Let's say 50 of them hungry brokers looking for that next thing that's going to bring them business. Right before lunch, there's a panel on stage, 4 top producing realtors. One of the questions: how many brokers offer to work open houses with you on the weekend? Be present in the open house. And look, it's not about the open house itself and the people coming through the door and potentially getting that client. It's partly about that, but it's much more about being for an hour or two. You could do lunch, you could do a dinner, you could do whatever, but instead, for an hour or two, you're working with and supporting that realtor, right? Be the gopher. If they run out of cookies, run out and get them more cookies while they stay and work their open house. If it's a crazy hot day and there's no air conditioning in the property, bomb out and grab a couple of skids of a flat of water, right? And be supportive of the realtor. So the question, of course, was how many times have brokers offered to work open houses with you? And one of the top producing realtors in their area said, never. In 9 years of being a realtor, not one broker has ever asked to work an open house with me. And kind of made like a sad face. What's the obvious thing that you're going to do at the end of the panel if you're a broker sitting in a room where a top producing realtor just said, no broker has ever asked me to work an open house? Anyone? Anyone? Like, this seemed pretty obvious. Out of the 150 brokers in that room, I made everybody stand up and I said, unless you actually approached that realtor and had a conversation with that realtor and ideally offered to work the next open house with them this weekend, sit down and feel shame. All but one broker in that entire audience sat down. So, Jeff, what's my best advice for a new broker other than picking up the phone? Take action, especially when it's on a silver platter right in front of you. When someone is asking you for help, give them the help. When they're saying, no broker has ever X, be the broker that X. Be that broker. I mean, that was a pretty mind-blowing ratio, 150 to 1. But here's the good news. Here's like the amazingly great news from that story for each and every one of you. That's your competition. That's your competition. If you see an opportunity and you don't pursue it, you're in good company. You're in the 99.5% of people who don't pursue. Okay, I think the math on that was 99.6666%. Like, you're in the 99.66% that won't do anything about it.
Hi, Dustin.
Yes.
My apologies. I have Ben on the line and he's ready for his question and answer session with you.
Fantastic.
Ben, can you hear Dustin?
Yes, I can hear him. Not very well, but I can hear him.
Well, we can hear you quite well.
Excellent.
So this is the way we're going to do it. Oh my gosh, everyone's going to have to stare at my face. Ben, we're not going to get your beautiful face on here. All right. Well, guys, just lean back and close your eyes and put the headphones in and listen. And we shall do. So good thing I got some questions together for you, Ben. So we're not going to do the presentation mode. We're going to do Q&A, correct?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, let's just get right into it then. I have that little list. Why don't we take it from the top on economic confidence and the potential for interest rate cuts? Mr. Tall, you've emphasized that consumer and business confidence, rather than the level of interest rates, is now the key determinant in economic trajectory. Consumer and business confidence. what factors most concern you about confidence in Canada, and what scenarios might tip confidence towards recovery? Because there seems to be a bit of a lack of
Yes,
confidence.
that's a very good question. Quite frankly, there is no question about the fact that the number one factor impacting the psyche of the market is really not Ottawa, it's Washington. It's what's happening in the US, the tariff situation, the uncertainty regarding the job market. The job market is slowing down, not because of weakness in the Canadian economy, but because of the fact that the uncertainty, the fog of uncertainty coming from Washington is impacting decisions when it comes to hiring and expansion. So that's a major factor, much more important, in my opinion, than another 25 basis points by the Bank of Canada reduction in interest rates. Having said that, it's very clear to me that the Bank of Canada should and will cut interest rates. We have a situation in which inflation is no longer an issue. If you look at the last few months, core inflation is around 2% more or less where it should be. The inflation story is more an American story, not a Canadian story. The Canadian economy is basically in a per capita recession. Economic growth in the second half of the year will be very close to zero. This is something that is inviting lower interest rates. I think that if you look at the housing market, clearly in a recessionary territory, especially the condo market, maybe we'll talk about it later, a lot of other things happening. So I believe that the Bank of Canada should and will cut interest rates, and I believe it will be overall 50 basis points September and maybe October or November.
That quarter point cut does seem imminent, and yes, perhaps another behind it. Speaking of the Bank of Canada and uncertainty, I highlighted in the spring that the Bank of Canada's monetary report used the word uncertainty 49 times, up from 5 times the previous report. So pretty significant increase in the use of the word. They had the most recent monetary report come out in July, in which they appear to have used the word uncertainty 79 times. Is it realistic? I mean, and I think you answered the question arguably in your first comments there, but is it realistic to expect uncertainty to drop and confidence to rise before the end of the current U.S. presidential term?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think yes. I think the answer is yes. It will not be as certain as it was a year or 2 years ago, because Trump is Trump and there's nothing you can do about it. But I think that the saga about the tariff situation is going to soften a little bit. The language is going to soften. And it's very interesting. Just a few months ago in a conference, somebody asked me, what was the most surprising aspect of Trump in your opinion? And I was thinking very hard about the answer. It's not about Trump's victory. It's not about the craziness. It's not about the volatility. It's not about the tariff. It's about the lack of resistance. There is no resistance. He's doing whatever he wants and nobody's saying no. Everybody says yes, man. So that's something that surprised me. There was absolutely no resistance. If you look at his team in the White House now, it is much weaker than it was in Trump 01. So the decision by the Federal Appeals Court in the US to basically say, no, not so fast, is extremely important. And now that's going to the Supreme Court. Now, remember, Trump has many other options, and he will continue to use them and push the envelope, which means that tariffs are here to stay. And the question is, what is the purpose of all those tariffs? It's not about jobs. It's not about factories moving to the US. It's not about the terms of trade. It's about the money. When people tell you it's not about the money, it's always about the money. And it is about the money. The US administration is now raising $320 billion every year from tariff. This is huge. And therefore, I believe that regardless what the scenario is, those tariffs are here to stay even after Trump, even in a Democratic White House, because show me the White House that will be willing to sacrifice $320 billion a year of revenue. They will not do it. And this revenue, in part, is actually a tax on the consumer, but it will be an invisible tax. So what I'm saying here, is that the level of uncertainty will be relatively high, but it will be lower than it is now because time is not in Trump's side. It is not. In a year and a half or less than a year and a half from now, there are going to be the midterm election. You need to show something. You need to show the unemployment rate falling. You need to show jobs are being created. And the opposite is happening. Jobs are going down, the unemployment rate is rising, inflation is rising. So he is actually losing the game, and he will need to show something, and therefore he will have to compromise. Now, the compromise means, and the way to put it in a normal way, is that there will be tariffs, but they will be manageable. The average tariff rate now, globally, with the US is about 18%. It used to be 2%. That's significant. With Canada, it's about 8-9%. We are going to negotiate, and it will be about 10%. So in Canada, it will be narrow but deep. Namely, it will impact some sectors, like the steel sector, but it will not be a major factor that will derail the economy, especially with the government helping those sectors that are impacted. So, you know what? I'm more optimistic about 2026. The uncertainty level will be there, but it will be lower than it is now. And that's exactly why the market is not nervous. You look at what we call the VIX measure of volatility in the financial market. It's basically back to where it was, like nothing happened. If you look at the corporate spreads, they're very tight, nothing happened. I don't have to tell you about valuations in the stock market, nothing happened. So the market is not buying the scenario that things are going to crash. The opposite is the case, and I tend to agree with that.
Well, we don't really have the S&P 500 anymore, though, do we? We have the S&P 7 and the S&P 493.
That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, you moved into question 3 there, and that's great because yes, I mean, I'm still going to ask you the question directly. Like, I'd like to drill a little deeper into this. How might a November decision by the U.S. Supreme Court on tariffs, either upholding or striking them down, how would that? 2 parts to this. Before I get to the piece that is coming, let me throw something at you that we didn't discuss. Whatever the judgment is, I mean, does it really matter? Like, even if they say, no, you can't do this, can they fundamentally actually stop Trump from continuing to charge them? Because to your point, there's no way they're going to want to refund.
Very quickly. The answer is yes. Now, remember, the decision was 7-4. So there were 4 judges that said that he can continue. That's significant, which means that you can establish a legal case to say that he can continue. We also have to remember that out of the 11 judges that were in that court, nobody was appointed by Trump. They were all appointed by Obama and Bush, which means that there is a possibility that the Supreme Court, that some of them were appointed by Trump, will actually decide to proceed with that and cancel the decision by the appeals court. That's one possibility. The other, even if the Supreme Court says, you know what, you cannot continue that, that's only one element. That's basically the national security element. There are all kinds of other tariff agreements and possibilities under the Constitution, about 6 of them, that Trump can use. He can use Section 232, he can use Section 122, all kinds of sections that basically give you some power. And that's why I say it is important, because the easiest way to impose tariff on everybody is the national security aspect. If you remove that, it's more restricted, but it doesn't mean that it goes to 0. And that's why I think that the average will be about 10 to 15%, which is manageable from a global perspective and definitely from a Canadian perspective.
Okay, and that was the key. So it seems like we're going to have an elevated tariff situation of some kind. That's happening. I mean, the uncertainty is now sort of perhaps settled into single-digit percentages of range. Are they going to be 12%, 8%, 6%, 14%? Like, the range is a lot narrower. How does this impact Canadian inflation expectations, interest rate policy?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Canada, the impact would be more on interest rates as opposed to inflation, quite frankly. Inflation in Canada is no longer an issue. We are not going to retaliate, therefore there will not be inflation factor impacting our side of the border. The opposite is the case. It's the US that will suffer inflation. And therefore, I think that inflation will not be the story. The story will be the weakening economy. The government, in Ottawa, will have to do something about it. So if we look at the steel sector, if you look at the lumber sector, if you look at even the auto sector to an extent, not to mention some other sectors that are vulnerable to Trump, all those sectors will have to receive some help from Canada, from the Canadian government. Having said that, this is going to be, as I said, narrow but deep. It will not impact the entire economy, and that's why I think that the economy will be able to function, especially with the Bank of Canada cutting by another 50 basis points.
So long as you're not in that narrow but deep segment of the economy, then you'll be okay. But for those who are, there could be some pain. Well,
Absolutely, and they will require some help from the government, and that's exactly what will happen.
okay, so on the topic of pain, there's still about 60% of outstanding mortgages renewing through 2025, 2026, and many will face higher payments, 10 to 20% higher, not 100% higher as was once being predicted. So it's still a substantial wave of renewals coming through, and you still see the odd headline about payment shock. Uh, yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of this, like the boy who cried wolf, when we hear about this payment shock triggering mass sales, et cetera. Does your analysis see any significant strain? Anecdotally, I'm sure there will be certain families, especially those caught in a little bit of a tariff pinch to top things off. But do you see anything of significance happening as far as increased mortgage payments having a notable impact on any of the markets in Canada?
Yeah, I think from a macro perspective, this is much ado about nothing, quite frankly. If you look at the people that are going to renew in 2026, about 45% of them will be renewing at actually lower interest rates, not higher interest rates, because they took short-term interest rates a year ago, 2 years ago. So I'm not too worried about it. The average number is about 10, 20%. I'm not worried about it as well in terms of delinquencies. They will rise, but not in a very significant way. There is a small pocket of borrowers that will see 40, 50% increase in their payments. That's significant. This segment of the market will see some losses, and that's something that you should expect in a recessionary condition. But this is not a macroeconomic story. It's a micro story. It's going to impact some individuals. It's not a macro story. It's simply not big enough. So all the hoopla about it is, in my opinion, from a macro perspective, much ado about nothing. It's not much ado about nothing if you're part of this space.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, we will have brokers who work with certain niches of clients in certain geographical areas who are going to have half of their clients or a quarter of their clients really feeling huge pressure and a huge pinch. And those individual brokers are it's going to be hard to not imagine this is the nationwide story. But like you say, microeconomic, not macroeconomic.
Exactly, and that's the key to understanding the situation. I think that media reports tend to exaggerate the situation. I think that to be careful when you discuss it with your client.
Well, on the topic of media exaggerations, everything else, we'll touch on one more that. Well, we'll go through the whole question here. So the headline is of course that there's an increase in missed mortgage payments. There's an increase in insolvencies. There's absolutely an increase in unsecured debt. Payments falling behind and whatnot, especially in urban centers like Toronto and Vancouver. Are you concerned that rising insolvencies could feed back into overall economic weakness? I mean, I think you probably just answered that question. But what should brokers be communicating?
Rising insolvencies is a major factor. It will be rising by 20, 30%, but remember, they will be rising from an extremely low base. So we have to be careful. The unemployment rate is going to go above 7%, and that's why we are cutting interest rates, and that's why we need to cut interest rates. But I think it would be naive to believe that we are going to go through this kind of recessionary conditions without some damage. There will be some damage, but it will be, again, not a huge macroeconomic story. It's not the 1990s by any stretch of the imagination.
Fair enough. I mean, with inflation, can you talk a little bit about sort of the stickiness of inflation? Because I think a lot of people thought of inflation in terms of gas prices. They saw gas prices spike. They went, "Oh my gosh," and then gas prices softened, and so that's great. So we're going to be okay. However, like the last two nights, I've gone out for dinner alone. Dinner alone used to be $25. I mean, I don't drink. It's pretty tame. $25. The last two nights, $49. Like, and nothing fancy. Like I'm talking sushi one night at a little tiny takeout sushi place in Squamish, BC, and a chicken burger at Cactus Club with a mocktail. $49. Like that inflation is it's here to stay. And I think it's here to stay in a lot of different spaces. And I don't know that the average Canadian was understanding when those numbers were running up month over month over month, that even getting inflation under control, it didn't mean prices were going to go back. So I don't,
Yeah,
can you
yeah,
comment a little
we
bit
have to
about that?
remember that inflation is a rate of change. So when you go to the supermarket and you have to mortgage your house to buy a cucumber, the Bank of Canada does not care. Not because of the fact that they are not nice people, they're actually very nice people for central bankers, but because of the fact that it's irrelevant. What's relevant is not the level of prices, it's the rate of growth, the change. And that change is slowing down, but absolutely right, from a very high level. And prices in many cases will not go down until something big happens. And that's something is not going to happen anytime soon, which means that unfortunately, we have to suffer the consequences of past inflation, and we don't see negative inflation, namely prices are not going down. And that's a major issue impacting the psyche of the consumer. So really, when you discuss interest rates and when you discuss inflation, you must distinguish between the level of prices and the rate of change of those prices, which is inflation, and that's why the Bank of Canada is focusing.
So the takeaway is $49 dinners for one are here to stay. And
Yeah,
yeah,
so just start cooking at home.
well, yes, I probably should do that myself. You're right.
Now, let me just tell you that I have 5 more minutes, unfortunately. So
Sorry, how much have we got time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Um, Very quickly, OSFI. OSFI identifies mortgage renewals and household debt, despite what we've just heard, as one of the top risks to the Canadian financial system. Again, feels like the boy who cried wolf. They've been identifying that as a top risk for years and years and years. But in your view, how prepared are the lenders to absorb any potential shocks, even though we've already identified the likelihood of a potential shock from payment defaults is quite low? I mean, I think more what would like to hear you speak to is OSFI's specific mandate, because I think it's important for the audience to understand that their mandate is primarily around protecting the Canadian banking system, not protecting the stability of the Canadian household. So, to your comments about the Bank of Canada doesn't care what a cucumber costs, what does OSFI care about? What does OSFI not care about? Can you comment on that at
Yeah,
all?
very, very quickly, I will say that OSFI cares about banks. They of course cares about the stability of the financial system, which is, of course, the stability of the economy as a whole. There's no question about it, including the consumer. So ensuring that the financial sector is stable will protect everybody because you don't want to deal with a financial sector that is not stable. The consumer is not the number one factor impacting the psyche of OSFI. It's the bank. It's the banking system. And therefore, when they have those, stress analysis and all kinds of other things, we have a situation in which they care about the ability of the banks to deal with the financial crisis. And let me tell you one thing. If I had to choose all banks from all over the world about the stability, I would choose the Canadian banks because we are extremely conservative. We are sacrificing profit because we are conservative, but extremely conservative, and Austria is even more conservative. So I'm not too worried about that, quite frankly.
All right. I know you're going to have to go soon here. I don't want to let you go without digging into this topic because this seems like something that is just being discovered by a lot of different people out there. You've long argued that housing supply is central to affordability, which of course we agree on that collectively. Seems like an economics 101 thing, supply demand. But can you dig into the supply numbers, the housing start numbers as they're currently being reported? Because it does feel like there's an underlying story here that has not been told, where at one point it was the housing start numbers were just kind of consistently 90% resale, 10% purpose-built rental. That shift in that mix has been huge, and it feels like it's been a little underreported. Maybe that's just me, but do we not need to
Absolutely. I'm going to
potentially
release
start?
a report actually tomorrow talking exactly about that. We are seeing a surge in purpose-built rental, and the condo market is in a recession. So things are changing. That's the opposite of what used to be the case for the past 10 years. And that's a good thing to an extent because, as you know, I've been very vocal about the need to increase supply of rental units in this country. I want to create a situation in which you are 35 years old, you are married, you have 2 kids, and you are renting. Nothing is wrong with you. But in order to do that, you need to deal with the company. And that's why purpose-built rentals is extremely important. And we need the government support here. We need incentives in terms of development charges, in terms of GST. And that's exactly what we are talking to the government. In fact, the reason why I have to go now is because I have a meeting with the finance ministry in order to discuss things that will go into the budget. So it's extremely important. You're absolutely right. And you will see governments at all levels giving more support to purpose-built rental, which is about time.
Well, it feels almost like a bit of a sleight of hand. They're talking about doubling housing starts when in reality most Canadians thought they were talking about doubling the creation of homes to purchase. We thought that's what they were talking about. But actually what's happened is homes to purchase has fallen dramatically.
Yes, I think that when it comes to the government, their focus is on rental as opposed to houses for purchase. That will change. I think that if you look at what's happening with the government, a lot of the money will go towards allowing the market to adjust to a new rental situation. But you're absolutely right that the focus is on rental, affordability rental, as opposed to purchasing. Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Have you got time for one more, or do you need to wrap up?
Okay, let's do it quickly.
Economic policy response in a slowing economy. So Canada's flirting with contraction. We're flirting with layoffs, rising unemployment. What fiscal or monetary policy moves beyond interest rate adjustments would you prioritize to cushion and
Yeah, monetary
revitalize the
policy
housing?
cannot do anything else besides cutting interest rates. I don't think they will go with the quantitative easing the way they did during the pandemics because this is not a pandemic. So they will cut interest rates another 50 basis points and call it a day. So the only thing that you can get is from fiscal policy. And I will not be surprised, quite frankly, that come October, when we have a budget, our budget deficit will be in the neighborhood of $80 to $100 billion, which will be 2.5–3% of GDP. This is a significant increase in the budget deficit. I don't think that Carney will be able to cut the amount of spending that he's talking about, but at the same time, we're going to see a significant increase in spending, including, by the way, on military, not to mention housing and other stuff. So I think that the budget deficit will go up significantly, and that's the way to support the economy in bad times.
Thank you. We will let you go. Thank you again for your time.
Again, I'm
and
sorry about all the technical issues, and let's do it again.
We'll do it again for sure. I'll let the team reach out, and we'll set something up, and then we can see some of your amazing slides and your wonderful face as well.
All the best. Thank you very much. I enjoy it.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I love having conversations with Mr. Tal. He's probably one of the all-time smartest people I think I've ever met. So you did hear it. You heard quarter point cut, almost certain, on the next meeting, followed by another quarter point cut. It sounded like he's extremely confident that's going to happen. So of course that does change some of your conversations around fixed versus variable. Of course, the answer always remains, it depends. We can definitely, I can double check if there are a few questions. Oh my gosh, there was a stack of questions. I'm sorry we're not able to dig into them. Before I get the hook here, very quickly, let me see what we've got here. Yes, Ben's voice was a little muffled. We did our best there. We did our best with the technology. Yeah, we did address that question around the tariffs. That's going to be interesting. Even if they're declared illegal by the Supreme Court, it does not mean they are going away. Yes, the market is at all-time high. Gold is at all-time highs. I know it's a fascinating time, and there were a few really great questions here. I apologize that we did not have time to get to them. Looks like we did cover most of them. There's a couple really great ones that we did not, and we did not touch on AI. All right. I think, sorry, there were 37 questions in here. Yeah, we didn't talk about the bond market and what that deficit might do to bond vigilantes and the bond markets. You're right. And I'm not qualified to talk about it, so I'm not going to. Does it even make sense to buy investment properties in the hopes of renting them out if supply for rentals is going to increase? That is a great takeaway. That was your takeaway, Hamasa. It's an excellent point, right? I mean, locally here in Vancouver, we have had a significant number of developers who had projects coming out of the ground, resale projects, whether it was 50 doors, 100 doors, 400 doors. Those projects were coming out of the ground. The demand fell off. Nobody's buying anything. And those developers pivoted, took advantage of the MLI Select program, the 50-year amortization. In many cases, it is offered to developers, not to our clients, but to developers. The 95% financing for rental stock that is offered at any price for developers, not for our clients. But CMHC has those programs, and those programs have absolutely made it very attractive for those developers to pivot from sitting on unsold inventory to purpose-built rental. So not only can they keep the financing in place to actually complete the project, which is crucial, they're also going to be able to most likely, again, 50-year amortization. Think about that, debt service those properties as long-term rentals. And then what happens ultimately? Are they stratified? Are they sold back into the market? Perhaps that's a whole nother thorny topic. But yeah, ultimately what that means is you've got major developers with entire towers of rentals coming online. So you've got your one or two condos on one corner, and then kitty corner, 300 units are coming up available. Brand new build, full amenities, beautiful properties, and they're coming up available at current market rents, which have dipped. So that's what you're competing with. And Mr. Tall touched on it around the fact that, and in Vancouver in particular, this was the case, there was virtually no corporate rental, purpose-built rental being built. I mean, in the Vancouver market, the mom and pop individual investors buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doors and renting them out, that has been the lifeblood and the backbone of the rental market in Vancouver for decades. And that is all pivoting right now. And there's no shortage of horror stories from tenants as well as landlords that are kind of creating this relationship where landlords are kind of almost tired of having to deal with tenants like individual mom and pop, and individual tenants are tired of chasing a landlord who's a snowbird and they're out of the country 6 months of the year, or they just don't want to put any money into the property at all, or they're just difficult to get a hold of and slow moving. They're not responsive. Whereas some of these major developers, they have a reputation to preserve, and they're having on-site management right there. Not to mention it's a brand new build. So nothing's really going wrong, but if something is going wrong, even if it's just a toilet situation or whatever, there's someone in the building 24/7 on demand to address these things. So yeah, you're competing. The competition is going to be interesting, and I'm not making the case one way or the other. I mean, you can tilt that story either way, but I would say it is tilting a little bit in favor of the corporate landlord in the Vancouver market, certainly over the next few years. That I could speak to. All right, you know what? Here we are at the top, around 10:30 to the minute. I do have a couple of closing comments to make, and I will let you guys go make your calls. So again, thanks for joining us for this market update. Please remember to complete our feedback survey. There's a few things you could say about this one, but we did our best, all right? We did our best. Hopefully that's what the feedback will be. We appreciate you doing your best. And ultimately, it will help us deliver content that you find valuable. So please fill out the feedback survey. Thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one, October 15th, 9:30 a.m., if memory serves. And don't forget to check out the MSA, the Mortgage Services Act sessions that are coming up as well. All right. Mr. Resvik, I see you. I apologize for not addressing that. I think we're going to wrap it from there. All right. Thanks, everybody.